order. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Everybody is here except Mr. Twaddell, but I'm guessing it's probably en route.
I would expect that.
I'm opening public comment at 5 o'clock. Mr. Parsons, do we have any electronic
I have nothing online.
communication?
Thank you.
Is there anybody here who would like to say anything before we get started in our work session? All right, then with that, we are going to roll right into our budget work session. Mary, would you like to lead off?
That would be appreciated, thank you. So in your, with your agenda, you do have some white pages that are attached. And so we had sent out to the board on Friday afternoon some thoughts on ideas for reducing the budget. We do have a proposal here that would reduce the increase to about $1.5 million or a 4.55% increase. The very first part of that is the world language teacher at Interlakes Elementary School. Recall we have a retirement, so this is a natural attrition point. We do have both Mr. Hilger and Mr. Deshay prepared this evening to just share with you how we would see still accomplishing world cultures, but without adding any staff. And we would transition. So I'm gonna turn it over.
Sorry.
Alright, I'm gonna exit. One of those days, my apologies.
Mr. Deshay. Thank you.
So essentially what you see on the graphic, is the overarching competencies currently for library and world cultures. So I think the intent of the position is eliminated and world cultures is no longer a standalone. And I think this, more specifically to ILES, the intent would be to try to teach world cultures through library, which is a standalone special at ILES. Currently, world cultures is taught in the librarian in the library at SCS with the librarian, so that the structure would not change at SCS that much. But the idea here would be to, I think, increase or teach information literacy skills through the integration of world cultures, if that makes sense. So what you see there are the various skills that would be taught through the integrated world cultures library class at both SCS and ILES. Mr. Deshay, if you want to add anything to that.
So, as Mr. Hilger said, the library currently is, a special in and of itself. We have a 7 special rotation that goes throughout the week. But primarily, there is a big focus on the research skills that are there, and especially as kids get older and get them ready for going up to the middle high. Integrating this content in where we have a separate world cultures course at this time, right? They can bring some of that content in and do those pieces to bring that part in. It's not exactly the same, obviously, as having 2 separate ones. I mean, I think that you have to acknowledge that piece there. And there's important components that she brings into the library from that perspective of readying them to go up and be independent users of the library. But integrating some of that in is certainly within the realm of what can be done. It certainly wouldn't be all of it, because there's other content as well that needs to come through there and those pieces. But so it wouldn't look like just world cultures in the library. It'd definitely be a combination of those 2 things that are happening there. So one way that you can do it is through that integration piece there. And certainly other staff might have a way to address other pieces with that too, just to add to it. But That's what I think.
Would that include like the language piece? So like today, in cultures, I feel like they learn some like language stuff, right? So they're learning some Spanish, some counting, some French, some counting. Would that be kind of
That'd probably be-
incorporated into this, or would
Yeah,
that
it'd
be?
probably be an impact. I'm not sure that we necessarily have the skill set on the language instruction currently there. Not that there couldn't be some pieces brought to that, but, you know, in terms of the way that it's done, right now, we have somebody that who speaks another language and can integrate that in a variety of different ways. You can do that without having the full knowledge of the language to an extent. But, you know, they're not gonna come out speaking another
Yeah.
language.
What about the impact of SES with the language piece?
Right now, the SES World Cultures really is immersive exposure. We don't have a strong language piece
Okay.
currently in place. We don't have a certified language teacher that speaks a different language currently, so.
Other questions for Mr. Boucher or Mr. Hilger? Thank you both very
Sounds
much.
like a great solution, thank you.
So next on the list of reductions, 2 paraeducator positions. These are open positions, so again, it's currently open, so nobody would be losing their position. Primarily looking at, we do have some students who will be reaching 22 who have currently one-on-ones, so we see that there's going to be a shift. And so we feel that this is a reasonable reduction. Transportation, we did get first student to refine a bit more, and this is with a replacement of a 776. So over a 3-year period, replacing our buses. It's a 5-year contract. I will say the contract will be year 1 is 17%, year 2, 6.75, year 3, 6.75% increase, year 4, 6.25, in year 5, 6.25. So really that first year is reset of wages primarily. You know, there's obviously the busing piece replacement, but the driver of that is really related to wages. But they did refine the number a little bit more. We had budgeted, because we were working with them, 18, and it's really come down to 17. So it's not a lot of money, but it's some money. We did, one of our goals is that the life skills program will use the Laker activity vehicle more regularly. That for community-based, they go to the library, they go to Hannaford. Having 2 Laker activity vehicles will make that more usable because many of the students have one-on-one paraeducators. So, the Laker activity vehicle can hold 14 people plus a driver, or it can hold 12 people plus a wheelchair. So 2 would make that more accessible for the life skills program. We did not further reduce special education transportation, however, because we are aware there are some things in kind of process at the moment, potentially, that might have some special education costs associated. So we would see that those funds would just maybe go somewhere else for special education transportation versus really being able to say it would be a cost savings. Each school is looking to do a reduction in other professional services, but really looking to try to accomplish things in a different way. ILES, looking at the naturalist program with Prescott Farm to see if that could be outside funded. It has in the past, so we are actively trying to pursue that. Sandwich Central School does have some funding that would allow some to support Mara Vista for a year, to also support some field trips and some in-school assemblies. So they actually do have funds readily accessible. The middle high looking to do a reduction, seeing with the 7th grade Squam Lake, the watershed. Sorry.
Those were errors in our spreadsheet, those aren't reductions
Okay.
that are happening, those trips are still happening.
Okay, the trips are happening, but the funding, we're adjusting the funding. So under for the middle high, professional services will be reduced by $6,500. How we'll make that up?
Because they were listed twice.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Supplies, furnishings, these were small furnishings that still existed, like a stool, a bookshelf. Our goal is to try to put an end of year fund balance together, so that came up to $1,900. Some co-curricular, we're just looking, for some groups, maybe to do like an end of year celebration, that maybe they do more of a fundraiser to support that versus using district funds for that. There are some things just not directly tied to the co-curricular. It's more of a, similar to like the football has an end of year or end of season banquet that the football booster parents put on. So trying to do something similar for some co-curricular. $132, it was just accounting. It was in both places, so we removed that from Office of Principal. Athletics Hall of Fame. So this is something that we are organized to get off the ground for next homecoming, but there is $3,000 that was budgeted for this year. So those funds could be moved forward to do this for homecoming. We would either be putting the $3,000 this year towards end of year fund balance and then asking to budget another $3,000. But instead, if we can just use the current $3,000 rather than budgeting for it for next year, makes sense. I had brought forward just our need to really, keep our auditorium in a good place because it does get some heavy use. We had put in using $25,000. We're recommending that be considered for end of year fund balance. One of the things we are planning to do is just a full analysis of our auditorium, who's using it, what's their connection to the Interlakes School District or the Interlakes community, what are we charging them, what does it actually cost? Because we do have some groups that their use far exceeds what we know we're paying just for staffing and so forth. So we're going to do that analysis kind of between the budget and early spring, and then look to see if we need to adjust our rates accordingly, which then again could be a revenue source. We did earn $41,000 in the auditorium last year, and certainly that revenue then offsets how much needs to be raised by local taxes. But I think at this point, trying to bring forward a budget that's palatable, as well as also will help to hopefully support the replacement of 2 boilers that are essential, will be appreciated. So that's where we are recommending postponing that $25,000.
Can I ask a question? Mary?
Yeah.
When we did the tour of the building and the furnaces, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, there were 2 that were going to be replaced in the middle high and 1 that's going to be replaced in the elementary?
2 of them at both locations. It's the same design, basically. There's a domestic.
2 in each.
Yeah.
So you have the flip-flop you can, where they go back and forth. Okay, because I thought I read it that there was 2 in 1, 2 boilers in one and 1 in another. In fact, it's 4, 2 in each.
Correct.
Okay.
I think I've been talking about them as the middle high boilers. I think I've been thinking of them as one unit.
Go join.
Yeah. So, supplies, taking up $5,000. This is printer supplies. We bought a printer a few years back now, or probably more than a few, probably more than like 5, to do some printing that would do like ADA signs, Braille and everything. Thing is, it's very complex and you got to do all these software upgrades. Like we thought it would be a savings, but the amount of knowledge you need to run this thing. And so we actually, at another day, would like to bring forward to the board. We think that we have somebody who works in the industry who would be willing to buy it from us. So that would be what we would like to do. But where we're not using it, we don't need the $5,000 in printer supplies. Electronic information access, about a $9,500 reduction. $6,000 in an artificial intelligence tool. We had put that in. The state is funding for another year Conmigo, which is an AI product. And so that's being funded this year. It's being funded next year by the state. It's a good place for us to put some energy into. as well as a lot of AI tools right now have a free option too. So like ChatGPT and some others. So we felt like focusing our energy on Conmigo made some sense, and where it's funded, all the better. Screencastify is something that we used during COVID, and we do still have some staff using it to capture some images. Correct? Maybe Mr. Parsons might give a better description of Screencastify.
Yeah, when we originally, back during COVID times, we pretty much had unlimited access, all students, all staff, district access. And then after COVID, they changed their price point to its per user. So we have over the years sort of reduced, how many actual we purchase. But when I looked at the cost versus, we probably have about 6 power users. It might just make sense to buy individual licenses if that's needed and not have as much as what we have, particularly the amount of screen recording options that are out there that are free right from your device, right from your Chromebook. So it's not something that's heavily used by students, and so we thought that would be an area where we could reduce.
And BuzzMath, we feel like we have some products that could support math learning, but without an additional cost. So that came into almost $326,000, bringing the increase down to $1,520,861, or 4.55. So on the next page, page 2, are things that we're hoping we will consider with end of year fund balance. And recall, we seem to be in a pretty good position right now, and some of that is because, quite frankly, there are special education contracted services that our contractor has not been able to fulfill. So, and this is not a prioritized list at this stage. It's really keeping track of things that we want the board to consider. So things like the classroom furniture that had been reduced, looking at curriculum was level funded, which again, that level funding was last year. We had basically removed funds with the idea that fund balance would support curriculum, which the fund balance did. Auditorium replacement, so again, considering putting in another 25 through fund balance. Site work replacement and repair ADA accessibility. This is an ongoing process. We had put in a few years back trying to just $125,000 annually to really just keep making those improvements, sidewalks, wheelchair accessibility, all of that. We've pulled it out of this proposed budget because, again, we need to prioritize those boilers. But our hope is that there would be fund balance that could maybe be used to continue that work. And then some additional that we're looking at. So special education, again, I think that there's maybe some potential needs that are coming to light at this stage, but before the budget is, it's hard because you're planning for next year, but things sometimes don't come up until after you propose the budget. But I think that it's realistic that we will have some additional special education costs. Food service, so again, looking at possibly having to supplement the the food service program. Things are in much better shape with food service. But the reality is you can't run in the negative with food service. And many districts do have to supplement. And I think we're at that point. The helmet covers, something for consideration. And putting aside $18,000 of additional funds through fund balance for legal services, primarily for negotiations for the collective bargaining, I think makes sense. And then the Humiston parking lot, paving for the parking lot is something that has been deferred for a number of years, and it's
Decades.
yes, it tends to be the one that we tend to think about being good old Yankee, but it definitely does have some need of being addressed.
So for perspective, Mary, usually we don't make a final decision on this until May, right?
Correct. Usually, I think we talk about it in May and then June you'll make a decision. I'm just kind of planting the seed. I
Sure.
want you to know what we have reduced, because I think that's always important for the board to know from what was proposed, you know, where some reductions came from, and then other things that we're seeing popping up. So that is,
I don't have it in front of me, but the 3 items that caused almost the entire
yes.
increase last year to this year, now that you've brought this down by that amount, we're pretty darn close to covering those.
Yes, we have done well in the sense that the 3 drivers of this budget are health and dental, which is $710,000.
Yeah.
Special education services up $619,000. And again, that really is, you're hitting year 1 and year 2 of your contract for paraeducators is a big piece of that. And the increase in health and dental. Transportation about 214. So those totaled $1,543,924. So we've made the increase lower than what those 3 drivers are.
Exactly. And that's something
Yep.
the audience needs to know.
So, and really appreciate the entire administrative team and the conversation and ability to look at things. We do have, I don't know, there were some questions that came in regarding the budget that I did answer in the pink paper. I do want to, I'm not sure, I know that Mr. Twiddell may be interested in these responses, so I don't know if you want to postpone
Please.
talking, okay. And maybe we can jump to maybe the conversation about the boilers. So if you turn to page
In the white paper.
3, in the white papers, page 3. So we are looking at the boiler replacements at ILES in the middle high. Plus, we would like to build off of the HVAC work that was done last summer at the middle high. There's more to be done. And so what we are looking at is probably boilers are 1.2 million, trying to do another 300,000 of HVAC for a total of $1.5 million. What we are asking the board to consider is this is a separate warrant article, so a standalone warrant article, and that the board consider either using a bond bank or a commercial bank to spread that cost out over, we're looking at 5 years is what we were thinking. And the reason for that is our hope is after that 5 years, so Honeywell leases will be coming off, so that's about $500,000+. The board may at that point be proposing another bond to the community because quite frankly, our bathrooms need updating, our locker room needs updating. You know, we've got some facility work. What I would say is before that would be a proposal to hire an architect to do a whole facilities space study. But the boilers are at end of life. We have gotten, we've really gotten our use out of them. They are 30 years old and
31 now.
31.
1990.
Okay, and so we're really at a point that they need to be done.
34.
34. Yeah.
34?
Did I just do math?
So we know what department you're from.
At any rate, I think as someone said, they really don't owe us anything, but we appreciate that they're continuing to work, and they are the drivers of our heating system. We do have the wood pellets. Those are more shoulder seasons. These are the workhorses.
Having gone through this process for the town for that $12.6 million bond offering, I'm wondering when you're down in the million, 2 million, 3 million, is that as efficient compared to
Yeah.
taking on maybe another project or two
Yeah.
that brings it up? I don't know what their fee structure is,
Yeah.
independent of their interest rate.
Yeah. If you borrowed 2 million, was it better than the 3 point, how did that affect
The
interest rate?
rating, she only gave me the one interest rate, so I
Okay.
don't know.
So we can go
I
back and
think
It's
I'll
just
ask
that-
ask
that.
the question.
It would probably come on the fee side, because they have to do as much work at their end, whether it's 2 or 20.
The interest rates were really driven by the number of years that you took the loan.
Well, yeah, that's
And
the yield curve.
Right, but I didn't see anything
I
with
think
an
they put it
increased cost.
in buckets of
You-
5 and under, and then 10 and under, and
Okay.
then like 15 and above.
So you think the cut's at 5?
I think it's 5.
Okay.
And
But
then
we'll-
That
they
answers
group-
the question.
They group those for the pool to get the interest rate lower, so you have to have numerous other municipalities or school districts in that price range, so that you're buying, so that it looks like they're taking out 200 million and you get lower rates due to
Right.
that. So it's all based on the pool, and when they get the rates, they don't know for sure who's applying yet, so it's kind of hearsay and they're dabbling in a budget number. So I think we'd have to go quite higher
Okay.
than what we're comfortable completing.
I think we're not prepared to do that.
Yeah, well, that was the
5 other
That's
projects.
gonna determine bond bank versus commercial
Yeah.
paper or something.
So what we do have, and we've left names of organizations off at this stage because we're not asking the board to make any kind of decision about going with a bond or a commercial bank this evening. What we want to do is give you a sense of what this looks like. These are proposals from 2 entities. And so the bond bank, it was 5 years at 3.08, commercial bank at 4.5 interest. The commercial bank off to the right is if you pay an additional, is it 25,000? 25,000 towards your principal each year. So, based on what we, know at this stage, 1.5 from the bond bank looks like you'd be paying 153,000 in interest. Commercial bank without paying any additional towards your principal would be 202,500. And if you paid 25, which you could increase, it would be 191,250. So I think what we're hoping for tonight, that the board understands the timeline too for bonding, and I might lean on you, Mrs. Dollop, to talk about, because you've been talking to, whether it's a bond or commercial lending, it is the same
It's the same
process.
We're moving on to page 4.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay.
page 4.
So the timeline for the public hearing can fall directly in line with the board's public hearing for the budget. We would just want to have that public hearing first. So on February 5th, if you decide to move forward with this, you would hold a separate public hearing for the bond and then close that hearing and then have your budget hearing to follow. And all of the posting is the same as well. We would just post it together. And then the warrant posting dates align with all of the budget posting dates. So that it's really, there's a lot of behind the scenes work that has to happen, but for the board's purposes, the postings are just falling right in line with the budget.
And the posting, Ashley, is to do a $1.5 million bond, not having to give the details of what the interest rate or.
Correct. It would be to raise the funds for the bond.
Okay,
And then you work out those details. If it's approved, then you work out the details
Okay.
after.
so again, it would be in line with the board not needing to make a decision tonight. I think go with the bond bank or commercial lending.
Right.
Really, on the 5th, it's just saying to the public, we want to have a standalone warrant article that is to raise $1.5 million, that we would be borrowing money from either a bond bank or commercial lending to pay for it over time,
Pardon me?
over a 5-year period.
And that decision would have to be made by the 28th. The board,
No, we have to post a public hearing, so the board would have to decide tonight that yes, we want on the 5th of February to have a public hearing asking the voters about raising $1.5 million for a separate warrant article that would be borrowed money.
And you're asking for that tonight. It could in theory be put
Bonded,
out, no, but the decision to do that has to be made by the board before the requirement to post it on Wednesday.
correct. So all you really are doing is tonight would be saying, we'd like to see what the public would say about going out for $1.5 million for the boilers plus some HVAC. That would be borrowed money. Without having all the details that it's gonna be at this interest rate, really it gives you the chance as to, the governing body to hear from the public. And then after that, you get to make a decision of how it would go forward.
And you would vote on warrant articles at the board meeting. So-
I think
or
the hope is to
after
maybe
that
to do that evening.
or that night.
After the hearing.
Yeah.
That's what we hope for.
So that is, kind of leads us to then the next page, page 5. So these are draft warrant articles, and again, they are just draft, but we show you in terms of the operating budget, which again would be an amount hopefully tonight, or if you need additional time, another date will be scheduled.
Mary, I would suggest we flip 3 and 4, so the bond issue
Yep.
is first, if we do that.
Yep.
Because that has to be open for at least 1 hour.
Yep.
It may, actually might be a statutory.
Okay, that's a good note. So, maybe the
That
board
would
just wants.
complicate our meeting. Because we've never had an hour-long
Annual meeting,
district meeting.
Well, I can remember some long ones.
Okay, but not in the last 7 years.
We could certainly see if maybe Article 2 could move down too.
Yeah, a couple 20 minutes.
Yeah, no.
They usually are pretty quick, so. Maybe the chorus could have something additional prepared beyond. So those are, again, some samples for your consideration. Maybe moving back to thinking about the general operating budget. There were a number of questions that I was, asked to prepare, at least in terms of some understanding. Do you want to go through those or?
Just 1 second. Are there any questions from board members about this warrant article and the boilers?
I guess procedurally, do we approve the creation of this Article 3 or 4 tonight as a separate? How do you want us to
So for
describe our approval of setting this as a bond or borrow?
So I think what you want to say is that these are draft warrant articles that you approve moving forward to the public budget hearing.
Yeah, could you almost say it in the first sentence, basically, to raise and appropriate the sum, and it says right there, through an issuance of bonds or notes.
Yep.
So we would just basically approve that we're raising the sum, and then the discretion would come after, the details would come after that, I guess, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Can we make that as a motion right now?
So if you're prepared to do that, that would be wonderful. And again, this is just to go forward to the public hearing.
Mhm.
Because you will decide after the public hearing,
For the final version.
right, of what will then be the posted
Yeah.
one that the public will
Does
actually.
everybody understand that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Are you
I would move that we present an article that would raise and appropriate the sum of $1.5 million through bond or note.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Siobhan. Are there any other discussion or comments on this proposal? Hearing none, I will Ask those in favor to say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Where's Ed?
Somewhere between here and there.
Does he think it's Monday? Because of the long
No, did he
holiday.
call?
So I know Sarah tried to reach out to everybody. I don't know, she may have left a voicemail.
She did. She reached me. She
We
reached me.
we talked about it at the last meeting, so, and he was here for that.
So I know
Well,
he
we,
was
we
expecting
still
to
have
hear.
opportunity for plenty of discussion, should we be, hearing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pink page is notwithstanding, we should move forward with our agenda.
Yeah.
That is, I guess, your next, if you want to go through the pink pages, or if you'd like.
I went through them, and it's a lot of specific questions about line items. I don't know if maybe people just want to take this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
If people have further questions, they can either contact you directly or wait till our next meeting.
Excellent.
Yeah, and good morning coffee exercise.
Anybody's gonna get
And I will send them to you electronically.
Oh, great.
So the board then, I guess, in terms of as a next step would be, are you supportive of the reductions that we've proposed? And is there a dollar amount then that you're ready to move forward to the public hearing?
So that would mean, assuming we agree with this, that for this year, the motion, correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley, the motion be to approve the 1.520861 increase in this year's budget based on the specific reductions from the original proposed amount.
Would you like that number? The total budget?
I would, please.
Sure. It's $34,912,337.
Thank you, Ashley. What Ashley said.
So if we looked at 24-25 at 33,391. 24-25 up at the top of page one.
Mhm.
Original increases were 1.85.
Yeah.
And we've now reduced those down to like 250,000. If I read the 1520.
No, the new number is the 1520 from the
The new-
1846.
Right, but if I look at it relative to one, last year's budget, and two, the original proposed budget for this. Again, it's trying to get to the point so that our residents understand the why behind it.
So our increases, our three drivers are actually more expensive than
Then
what we are proposing as an increase.
exactly.
Okay, yeah.
So would anybody like to make that motion?
Can I just say, I make that motion?
Yes.
As stated.
There we go.
As stated, there is a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I don't wanna have to.
Jim
I
beat you
didn't
to
write
it.
down
He
the
had the
number.
nice casual finger with it. Is there any other discussion about our budget? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There we go.
Good job.
Great team effort, really great.
Doing this
It was, and I would like to thank the administrators here this evening for your efforts. These are not comfortable discussions to have, but ones that we must, and thank you for your efforts to come up with what I feel is a pretty rational approach. So,
So we will prepare packets for the public hearing. Within that will be pieces like, it will have a revenue estimated revenue. It will also have, if this was to pass, what it would do to your taxes. So we will have all those materials.
those materials are done every year, Jim, like in that format. So people have a full picture.
Yeah.
From a lot of different views,
Yes.
quite honestly.
I
So-
participated last year as a citizen, I guess, but not as a board member, so
Mhm.
I did go.
Yeah,
I remember you.
So we will get those all prepared.
okay, great. So we had talked about having another meeting potentially next Tuesday, which I do think we have to now.
If necessary, yeah.
We've had this, we seem to be in agreement on this approach. And so unless we hear some revelation at the budget hearing, I would hope that we could take that final vote that night, because Jim will be at that hearing, but he will not be able to make it to the next available date at which we would have to vote to be able to have this meet all the timeline requirements. Is that fair enough?
Yes.
Which was the 13th or something, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So if you have another epiphany about something in the budget between now and so that hearing, the hearing is on February 5th, which is a Wednesday, not a Tuesday. Please contact Mary directly.
Auditorium, I assume?
Yes.
Auditorium versus gym or?
Auditorium.
Got it.
And it is at 6 PM.
And then we have, right after that week, the following week, we have a regular meeting at 5:30. It'll start at 5:30. We'll do the non-public, and then we'll have our start of a regular session at 6. Are there any questions about that?
Only if they call and remind us.
Mr. Parsons, do we have any folks online with any public comment?
No, sir.
Thank you. Last chance from the folks in the crowd. Wave your hand, just stand up, start talking.
Can I just double check? The February 11th meeting, you'll do non-public first, so 5:30 start for non-public.
Correct, on February 11th, we have to start our public meeting at 5:30, but we will immediately go into non-public.
Get you.
Complete the non-public in the half hour, or what we can of it, depending on what we have. And then we will definitely start with folks coming in at 6 o'clock.
Charlie, can I
Yes,
ask a question?
Nancy, please
So
do.
I did share an article with a couple of people who didn't get it, but this was an article about decline in enrollment in New Hampshire and the implications for school districts. And there, my big question is there ever a time when we can really think more globally about these issues and what the school board can do in terms of supporting all of you? You know, there's a quote here, this is from The Sun Also Rises, but he says, the impact of declining student enrollment in a district is sort of like the way Mike Campbell in Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises described the process of a wealthy person going bankrupt. 2 ways, gradually and then suddenly. And he's got a great chart about what's happening with enrollment and at the same time what's happening with the cost of education, and his position is that it's going to happen suddenly. And it just strikes me that I appreciate the work all of you are putting into this, and I've been there, done that myself, and I understand how many hours go into creating a yearly budget. But as a school board, I think one of our tasks is to take the 30,000 foot up view and say what's coming down the road and how can we best prepare for that. And I just don't feel like there's been an opportunity to have that kind of conversation.
No, I think that's something coming down the pipe sooner rather than later, Nancy. And correct me if you think I'm wrong, Mary, but this is already conversations that every district in this state is feeling this, and probably the whole region. But the superintendents who meet regularly at least in the region, are already brainstorming about different ways. And there's probably going to be some specific information in the next month and a half to 2 months before the annual meeting, you think? So
Possibly.
the
There's some
topic is
conversations
going to
as
come
well.
up this year. And and plus we have the strategic planning, which will be somewhat of an opportunity to also have those discussions or raise those issues.
Speaking of those, the town, Meredith, is launching the same exercise.
Yes.
Seems crazy, but why are their first interview ought to be with the company that just did that, because they had a whole section on the demographics of our communities as well. And don't need to do the same job twice.
All All right, any other questions or comments? It's now 5:44. I'm gonna close public comment. Any final words of wisdom? Who's gonna win the Super Bowl? Nobody wants to jump on that.
I don't know who's playing.
There's only one team that I can even entertain liking. All the rest I hate.
What's the team?
Washington.
Oh.
I can't root for the Bills. I can't root for the Chiefs.
Go Birds.
Thank you for laying your heart out there,
I
Joe.
can't root for the Eagles. There you go.
Let's see what your inbox looks like tomorrow.
I stand by it all.
Public comments, so they're all.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Goodbye. Enjoy your homes. You were right on. Right on. I didn't know. You were gone. So, that was-